Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to hear is not just another trade story. It is a moment that will be written into the history books of North America. The President of the United States has just put a gun to the head of Canadian industry. He has told Canada's steelmakers, Canada's aluminum producers, Canada's hard-working factory towns that they have one choice. Move your factories to America. Move your workers to America. Move your money to America, or watch your business die under 50% tariffs. That is the offer. That is the threat. And tonight Mark Carney is fighting back. By the end of this analysis, you will understand exactly what just happened, why it is happening right now, and why the next 90 days could decide the future of the United States and Canada for an entire generation. Let me walk you through what just took place. On Thursday afternoon, deep inside the Federal Register of the United States government, a single notice was quietly published. It did not get front-page coverage. It did not get primetime attention, but that notice may end up being one of the most aggressive economic moves the current administration has ever made against an ally. The notice creates a formal process, a real bureaucratic legal pathway. Canadian aluminum companies and Canadian steel companies can now apply for relief from the crushing 50% tariffs that the President has slapped on their industries. But here is the trick. Here is the catch that has Ottawa in an uproar tonight. They only get that relief if they promise in writing to move future production into the United States. Read that again slowly. The American government is telling foreign companies from a friendly neighbor, foreign companies from a country that has been America's closest partner for more than 100 years, that they will only be spared if they pull up their roots and walk south. International trade lawyer William Pellerin, who represents many of the Canadian companies caught in the storm, did not mince his words. He said this is a very aggressive tactic by the United States. He said it reinforces an approach the world has seen from this White House for a long time now, an approach he summarized in one chilling sentence: "We win if you lose." That, ladies and gentlemen, is not the language of allies. That is the language of an economic war. Now, I want you to understand the scale of what is happening on the ground in Canada right now, because this is not theory. This is not a future scenario. This is happening today, this hour, in real Canadian towns. The same lawyer, William Pellerin, said many of his clients are laying off employees. Many are closing facilities. He called it really painful to watch these massive layoffs unfold across Canada. The Canadian economy lost 84,000 jobs in a single month earlier this year. 84,000 families, 84,000 kitchen tables, 84,000 parents going home and telling their kids that the world has changed. The auto sector got hit. The steel sector got hit. The forestry sector got hit. And the man behind the desk in the Oval Office stood up Thursday and said it like he was reading off a victory list. He said car companies are coming from Canada. They are coming from Mexico. They are coming from Germany. They are coming from Japan. He said it as if the suffering of his northern neighbors was the very point. Because for the President, that is the point. His entire trade philosophy rests on one idea: pain is the lever. If you make foreign production hurt enough, foreign companies will give up and bring their factories to America. He has been doing this for over a year now to Canadian aluminum and Canadian steel. He started at 25%, then he doubled it to 50%. Then earlier this month his administration changed the way it applies metal duties to manufactured goods, and that change hit Canadian companies even harder. Layer after layer, squeeze after squeeze, and now the final move on the chessboard, the escape hatch. Bring your factory south or stay in Canada and bleed. But here's where the story gets really interesting, because Canada is not blinking, Canada is not begging, Canada is fighting back. And the man leading that fight is Mark Carney. On Thursday, the same day the United States dropped this bombshell offer, Prime Minister Mark Carney stood in front of reporters and called the American sectoral tariffs a violation of North America's free trade deal. Not an irritant, not a misunderstanding, a violation. He said Canada is ready to enter into detailed negotiations, but he added something that Washington did not want to hear. He said Canada is also ready to wait if it has to. Translation: we are not going to be bullied into a bad deal just because you are squeezing us. When asked about the constant complaints from American officials over Canadian provinces banning American alcohol, Carney's patience snapped. He fired back with a line that has been echoing across Ottawa ever since. He said, "You know what is an irritant? A 50% tariff on steel and aluminum, 25% on automobiles, all of the tariffs on forest products. That, Mr. President, is an irritant." And then there is the response from the industry itself, because the people who actually run Canada's aluminum sector were given a microphone and they used it. Jean Simard, the chief executive of the Aluminum Association of Canada, was put on national television to react to the American offer. He did not hold back. He called the American proposal unfeasible. He said the math does not work, and then he gave the line of the week. He called the entire scheme fuzzy mathematics. He pointed out that the offer requires billions of dollars in new investment on the basis of metal prices that nobody can predict 5 or 10 years from now. He said the aluminum sector cannot just pick up and move. The reason aluminum is made in Quebec is because Quebec has cheap, clean hydroelectric power. You cannot put a hydroelectric dam on a moving truck. You cannot relocate a river to Pennsylvania. The American offer treats Canadian industry like it is portable furniture. It is not. Catherine Cobden, who runs the Canadian Steel Producers Association, was even sharper in her assessment. She pointed out that a steel plant is not a small investment. She said you might have $1 billion or more of assets sitting inside one of these facilities. That is significant value, she said, that you do not just shudder and walk away from, lock the doors and turn out the lights. She made it clear that there is enormous uncertainty about how many Canadian steel companies will even bother applying. The American offer has so many discretionary clauses, so many conditions, so many escape hatches for the United States itself, that no rational Canadian executive could bet the company on it. So why is this happening now? Why this week? Why this offer? To answer that, you have to look at the calendar. On July 1st of this year, the entire Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, the trade pact known as CUSMA, comes up for its first formal review. This is the deal that replaced the original North American Free Trade Agreement back during the first term of the current president. It is the deal that he himself negotiated. It is the deal that he himself called the best trade agreement ever signed. And now, just weeks before the review begins, his administration is pressing every button it can find to get Canada to come to the table on its knees. Reports out of Washington have suggested that the United States is demanding what some have called an entry fee from Canada before the negotiations even start. Concessions on dairy quotas, concessions on Canadian online streaming laws, concessions on Canadian rules protecting Canadian news, concessions on the provincial alcohol bans. The list is long, the pressure is intense, and in the middle of all this, the United States Trade Representative Jameson Greer told the House Ways and Means Committee in Washington that Canada is doubling down on globalization by signing trade deals with other countries. He said this with disapproval. He said this as if it were a betrayal. But Mark Carney has said himself that Canada has signed 20 new trade agreements across 4 continents in under 1 year. Canada is not waiting for America to make up its mind. Canada is finding new dance partners. This is the chess match unfolding right now. The United States believes it has the upper hand because America is Canada's biggest customer. More than 70% of Canadian exports go south of the border. The American market is the air that Canadian industry breathes. So, the thinking inside the White House is simple. Squeeze Canada hard enough and Canada will fold. They have to. They have nowhere else to go. But Mark Carney is betting that this analysis is wrong. He is betting that Canadian voters, Canadian workers, Canadian premiers will not tolerate a humiliating surrender to the current administration. He is betting that if he holds firm long enough, the political pressure inside the United States will start to build. Because here is the thing the American media does not talk about enough. The tariffs are hurting American workers too. Studies have shown that the tariffs have cost American manufacturing tens of thousands of jobs. American auto plants are slowing down. American consumers are paying more for everything from cars to canned goods. Even the American trade representative himself, Jameson Greer, was forced to admit before Congress that the picture in the United States is mixed at best. And then there is the political dimension that nobody in Washington wants to discuss in public. Canada is not just a trading partner. Canada is a NATO ally. Canada is a defense partner. Canada shares the longest undefended border in the world with the United States. Canada is the country that took American passenger jets out of the sky on September 11, 2001, and gave Americans beds and meals in tiny towns when they had nowhere else to go. The relationship between these two countries is not transactional, it is generational, and there are former Canadian politicians, including former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who have started warning publicly that American economic coercion risks pushing Canada closer to China. Think about that. The strategy designed to bring Canadian factories home may end up pushing Canada into a deeper economic relationship with America's biggest rival. That is not a win. That is a strategic catastrophe in slow motion. Mark Carney is not waiting around to see how this plays out. He has just announced a brand new 24-member advisory committee on Canada-United States economic relations. He has packed it with industry leaders, with union leaders like Unifor's Lana Payne, with former Conservative Party leaders like Erin O'Toole, with former cabinet ministers like Lisa Raitt, with the former Premier of Quebec, Jean Charest. This is not a partisan committee. This is a national unity committee. Carney is signaling to Washington that Canada is preparing for a long fight, and that the entire Canadian establishment, left and right, is lining up behind the same strategy. Hold the line. Do not give up the family farm just to make the American president feel like he won something on television. And then there is Mexico. Carney has been on the phone with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, coordinating positions ahead of the CUSMA review. The two leaders met face-to-face last September. They have agreed to keep the trilateral deal alive. Mexico is in a similar position to Canada. Mexico is also being squeezed. Mexico is also being told bring factories home. And Mexico, like Canada, is starting to realize that the only way to push back against this kind of pressure is to push back together. The European Union is watching all of this very carefully. China is watching. Japan is watching. Every country in the world that has ever sold something to America is studying this fight. Because if Canada loses, every one of them is next. So what happens now? What are the scenarios on the table? Let me walk you through three possibilities. Scenario number 1, Canada caves. Carney accepts a watered-down version of the American demands, gives up some dairy concessions, drops the alcohol bans, and gets a partial reduction in the steel and aluminum tariffs. The American president declares a massive victory. American voters cheer. Canadian voters punish Carney at the next election. Probability, in this analyst's opinion, low. Carney has staked his political career on not being bullied. Scenario number 2, the talks drag on past July 1st with no resolution. Sectoral tariffs stay in place. The CUSMA review extends into next year. Both economies suffer. Both leaders dig in. Canadian companies continue to lay off workers, but Canadian voters rally around their flag. American manufacturers continue to lose access to cheap Canadian inputs. American auto plants continue to slow down. Eventually, somewhere in 2027, both sides come back to the table with cooler heads. Probability, in this analyst's opinion, the most likely outcome by far. Scenario number 3, Canada walks. Mark Carney decides he has had enough. He invokes the dispute settlement clauses of CUSMA. He announces massive new retaliatory tariffs. He accelerates Canada's pivot toward Europe and Asia. He coordinates with Mexico to issue a joint statement. The North American economic order, as we have known it for 30 years, breaks. Probability low but rising every single week that the pressure keeps escalating. What you have to understand is that Mark Carney is not a politician who came up through the rough and tumble of partisan combat. He was the governor of the Bank of Canada. He was the governor of the Bank of England. He has spent his entire career in central banking, surrounded by spreadsheets and economic models. He does not bluff. He does not posture. When he says Canada will wait if it has to, he means it. When he calls the American tariffs a violation of the trade deal, he is not throwing a rhetorical punch. He is laying the legal groundwork for a formal dispute, and here is the question that should keep every American policymaker awake at night. What if Mark Carney is right? What if the cost of this strategy ends up being measured not in factories that come home, but in alliances that fall apart? What if the future history books look back at this moment as the week when the United States quietly started losing the trust of its closest neighbor? What if the next generation of Canadian leaders grows up believing that America is no longer a reliable partner and starts building their economic future without us? There is a saying in trade negotiations, whoever needs the deal less wins. For decades, that was the United States. America was the buyer. Canada was the seller. Canada needed America more than America needed Canada. But globalization has changed the math. Canada has been signing deals with the European Union, with Japan, with the United Kingdom, with the rising economies of the Pacific. And every single one of those deals is a small piece of leverage, a small alternative, a small reason to walk away from a bad American offer. The world is bigger than the United States. The world is bigger than the current occupant of the White House. And Mark Carney is reminding everyone in Ottawa every single day that Canada has options. So here is what to watch in the coming days and weeks. Watch the meeting of Carney's new advisory committee, which is set to gather for the very first time. Watch whether any major Canadian aluminum or steel company actually applies for the American tariff relief offer. If none of them apply, the American strategy is exposed as a bluff. Watch the relationship between Carney and Sheinbaum, because if Canada and Mexico stand together, the leverage shrinks dramatically. Watch the bond markets, the currency markets, the auto sector employment numbers in Detroit and in Windsor. The economic pain is real on both sides of the border, and at some point somebody in Washington is going to start asking out loud whether this fight is worth it. Here's the bottom line. The United States has just made the most aggressive move it has ever made against Canadian industry, and Canada has refused to bend. This is not a one-day story. This is not a one-week story. This is the opening chapter of a fight that will reshape North America for the next decade. Mark Carney is not the previous Prime Minister. He is not going to get baited into emotional outbursts. He is not going to be photographed at a Florida resort looking like a junior partner. He is going to play the long game. He is going to build coalitions. He is going to wait. And the question for the American president is whether his political base can stomach a fight that drags on, that costs American jobs, that drives up American prices, and that hands the rest of the world a front-row seat to watch the United States squeeze its closest friend. So, my question to you tonight, the question I want every single one of you to drop into the comment section below, is this. Whose side wins this fight? Is it the man in the White House who believes pain is the lever that bends every economy to his will? Or is it Carney, who believes that patience, principle, and partnership will outlast any tariff? Tell me what you think in the comments. Tell me which scenario you find most likely. Tell me whether you believe Canada will hold the line, or whether you believe Carney will be forced to fold. I read every comment, and I will pin the most thoughtful responses at the top. If this analysis has helped you understand what is really happening between Washington and Ottawa right now, do me a small favor. Engage with this content so the algorithm pushes it out to more people who deserve to know the truth. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, click that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell. Because the next 90 days are going to bring story after story after story out of this trade war, and you do not want to miss a single update. We will be tracking every move, every speech, every leak, every deal. Stay sharp out there, ladies and gentlemen. The future of North America is being written right now, and tonight you are watching it happen in real time.